The moment Nathan Hayes's hand touched hers, the entire ballroom froze. Glasses stopped. Mid-air. Laughter died in throats, and 200 pairs of eyes turned toward the one woman this city had spent a year pretending not to see. A decorated Navy officer, the man everyone trusted, had just chosen the woman everyone else had abandoned. Nobody in that room understood what it would cost him. Before the night ended, his career, his reputation, and everything he'd built in silence would hang by a single decision. If you're watching this from your living room tonight, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if stories about real courage, real fathers, and real love still move you, hit subscribe, because this one is only getting started. The chandeliers at the Harbor View Hotel threw gold light across 200 faces, and not one of them was looking at Olivia Carter. She stood near the tall windows at the edge of the ballroom, a glass of untouched sparkling water sweating in her hand, watching couples turn and laugh under the light like they belonged to a world she used to be part of. Nobody had said a cruel word to her all night. Nobody had to. The silence around her was its own kind of sentence, and she had been serving it for almost a year. "Olivia, you made it." Her friend Diane's voice. It was the third time it had happened that evening. A quick greeting, a squeeze of the arm, a promise. "We'll catch up in a minute." And then Diane was gone again, swallowed by the crowd pulled toward someone more interesting. Someone whose name didn't come with a story people whispered about at dinner parties. Olivia had learned the pattern months ago. She no longer expected the minute to come. She turned toward the window instead, because at least the window didn't perform politeness at her and then disappear. Outside, the harbor lights blinked against black water, small and steady, and she found herself thinking that even the boats out there had somewhere to go. "You okay, honey?" Her sister Renee appeared at her elbow, champagne in hand, eyes already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. It wasn't unkindness. Olivia understood that. It was just habit. The habit an entire town had built around the idea that Olivia Carter had become a woman, to be handled carefully, and then set aside. "I'm fine," Olivia said, because it was easier than the truth. Renee gave her a look that wasn't quite convinced, opened her mouth as if she might actually stay this time, and then somebody called her name from across the room, and she was moving again, already lifting a hand in greeting, already leaving. Olivia watched her go, and didn't blame her. That was the strange, exhausting part of it. She didn't blame any of them. She understood exactly why it had happened. When your marriage falls apart in public, when the man you built a life with leaves you for someone younger, and does it loudly, does it in a way the whole town gets to watch, people don't quite know what to do with you afterward. Sympathy has a shelf life. After that, you become something people manage, something they're careful around, something they quietly decide is safer to keep at arm's length. She'd been divorced 11 months. In that time, she had watched her guest list shrink from 40 names to 4. She had watched invitations that used to come automatically start arriving late, as afterthoughts, as favors. She had learned to recognize the particular tone people used when they were being kind to her out of guilt rather than affection. Tonight, she almost hadn't come at all. But her daughter had asked her to, gently the way 16-year-olds sometimes surprise you by being wiser than you expect. "You can't just disappear from your own life, Mom," Maya had said, straightening the collar of Olivia's dress before she left the house. "Go. Stand in the room. Let them see you're still standing." So here she was, standing, alone. The band shifted into something slower, a song with a rolling piano line that made the whole floor stir, couples finding each other, hands finding waists, the practiced choreography of people who had partners waiting for exactly this moment. Olivia watched it happen the way she might watch weather through glass, present, but not part of it. She was about to slip toward the terrace, toward air that didn't smell like perfume and old money, when the doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. A man walked in. He wore a navy dress uniform, dark and precise, the kind that made a person stand differently just by wearing it. Shoulders set, spine straight, not from vanity, but from years of training. The body remembers even in a room full of silk and small talk. He didn't pause to look for anyone. He didn't scan the crowd for status the way most men in that room did the second they walked in. He simply walked. Olivia recognized him vaguely. Nathan Hayes, the name floated up from somewhere in the back of her memory. Everyone in town knew of him, even if they didn't know him. The Navy officer. The widower, no, not quite, she corrected herself, trying to remember. The single father. The man who'd lost his wife years ago and had somehow impossibly kept raising his daughter alone between deployments, without complaint, without asking anyone for anything. People respected Nathan Hayes the way people respect a mountain, from a distance, without expecting to actually talk to it. He crossed the ballroom with the same unhurried economy of motion she imagined he used walking the deck of a ship, and for a moment Olivia thought he was heading toward the bar, or toward one of the tables where the base commanders sat with their wives trading the kind of conversation men in uniform trade at events like this. He wasn't. He was walking toward her. Olivia felt her spine straighten instinctively, the old reflex of a woman who had spent a year learning to brace for pity. She lifted her chin slightly, ready for whatever kind, hollow thing he was about to say. "How are you holding up?" Or "It's so good to see you out." The kind of sentence that always managed to remind her of exactly what she'd lost even while pretending to be supportive. Nathan stopped in front of her. He didn't say any of those things. He set his drink down on the tray of a passing waiter, and then he simply held out his hand. "Would you like to dance?" For a full second, Olivia didn't understand the words. They didn't fit the moment. They didn't fit her. "I'm sorry," she said. "Would you like to dance?" Nathan repeated quieter this time, like he understood she needed the question asked once more before it could become real. Around them, the ballroom noise didn't stop exactly, but it changed. Olivia felt it before she understood it, the particular shift in a room when several dozen people notice something at the same time and try very hard to look like they haven't. Conversations that had been easy and loud a moment ago suddenly had gaps in them. Heads turned deliberately casually toward the window where the quiet Navy officer was standing with his hand extended to the woman nobody talked to anymore. Olivia felt her face go hot. "I don't need anyone to rescue me," she said, and she heard how sharp it came out, sharper than she meant, but she couldn't stop it. A year of swallowing pity had left something raw just under the surface, and it came up fast whenever she felt the shape of that pity approaching again, even dressed up as kindness. Especially dressed up as kindness. Nathan didn't flinch. He didn't pull his hand back either. "I know," he said simply. That was it. 2 words. No explanation, no offense taken, no attempt to convince her she'd misunderstood him. Olivia stared at him. She had expected almost every version of this conversation except this one. She had prepared for pity for performance, even for the particular cruelty some men wore as concern. She had not prepared for a man to simply agree with her and keep his hand exactly where it was patient, unbothered waiting. "Then why are you asking?" she said. "Because it's a good song," Nathan said. "And you look like you wanted to be anywhere but this window." Something in her chest loosened just slightly at the honesty of it. Not a compliment. Not a rescue. Just an observation plainly stated the way she imagined he might report the weather, or the state of a ship's engine, because it was true, and because there was no reason to dress it up as anything else. She looked past him for a moment at the room full of people who were now very obviously not looking at them while looking at nothing else. Diane's champagne glass, frozen halfway to her mouth. Renee eyebrows raised so high they'd nearly left her forehead. A dozen other faces caught mid-thought, mid-judgment, already composing the version of this story they'd tell tomorrow. Olivia thought about walking away. It would have been easier. It would have avoided giving them anything more to talk about. Instead, she put her glass down. "One dance," she said. "That's it." "One dance?" Nathan agreed, and something that wasn't quite a smile moved at the corner of his mouth. Not triumph, not smugness, just quiet satisfaction, like a man who'd expected exactly this answer and was glad to have gotten it anyway. His hand closed around hers warm and steady, and he led her out onto the floor. The first few seconds were the hardest. Olivia felt every eye in the room on her back, felt the particular heat of being watched by people who had spent a year training themselves not to look at her and now couldn't stop. She held herself stiffly, chin up, the posture of a woman braced for impact. Nathan didn't rush her. He held her hand and set his other palm lightly at her waist. The distance between them respectful, correct, the kind of hold a man learns not from romance novels, but from actual ballroom lessons, precise and careful. He didn't pull her close. He didn't try to make a statement with his body the way some men might, using a dance as a performance of ownership or rescue. He just danced, simply, competently, like a man doing a task he'd learned to do well a long time ago and hadn't forgotten. "You're doing that thing," he said after a moment, "where you're counting the exits." Olivia's eyes flicked up to his, startled. "I am not." "You are. I do it too. It's a habit you don't lose." A small pause. "Comes from spending a lot of time in rooms where you need to know where the door is." "I don't spend my time on ships, Mr. Hayes." "No," he agreed. "But I'd guess you've spent the last 11 months in rooms that didn't feel safe either. Different kind of ship. Same instinct." Olivia missed a step. Not badly, just enough that his hand tightened slightly at her waist, steadying her before she even fully registered she'd stumbled. "How do you know it's been 11 months?" she asked, quieter now. "I didn't," Nathan admitted. "I know it's been about a year. People talk. I don't usually listen, but some things get repeated enough that they stick whether you want them to or not." "And what else stuck?" He was quiet for a moment, turning her gently with the music, and Olivia had the strange sense that he was choosing his next words the way a man chooses his footing on unstable ground, carefully but without hesitation. "That your husband left you for someone half his age and made sure the whole town knew about it before you did," Nathan said. "That people decided that made you the person to be careful around instead of him. And that somewhere along the way, everyone forgot that being left isn't the same thing as doing something wrong." Olivia felt her throat tighten. She hated how close it was to tears, hated that a stranger in a Navy uniform had summarized her entire year more accurately in 3 sentences than her own sister had managed in 11 months of careful, distant kindness. "That's a lot of talk for a man who doesn't usually listen," she said, trying to keep her voice light and not quite managing it. "I remember things that don't add up," Nathan said. "A woman losing her marriage isn't a crime. But this town's been treating you like you committed one. That never sat right with me." "So this is charity, then?" The words came out flatter than she meant, an old defense mechanism reactivating on its own. The Navy officer doing his good deed for the evening. Nathan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did, a flicker of something that might have been disappointment, or maybe just patience being tested. "If I wanted to do a good deed," he said, "I'd have written a check to the silent auction table and gone home an hour ago. I'm dancing with you because you looked like the only honest person in this room, and I got tired of watching a room full of people pretend not to see her." Olivia didn't have a response for that, not immediately. The song moved through its bridge, the piano rolling into something fuller, and for a few bars neither of them said anything at all, just moved together across the floor. 2 people who had an hour ago been strangers, now sharing a silence that felt less awkward than it should have. "You're not what I expected," she finally said. "Neither are you," Nathan replied. "Everyone told me you were difficult, guarded, cold even. I think what they meant was that you stopped smiling at people who didn't deserve it." Olivia let out a breath that was almost a laugh, the first real almost laugh she'd had in weeks. "That's a very generous interpretation. I've had a lot of time to think about people who get written off unfairly," Nathan said, and something in his voice shifted, dropped its careful lightness. "My daughter's mother, my wife. She got sick when Lily was 3. Cancer. Fast. Ugly. People were kind for about 2 months. Casseroles, cards, the whole thing. Then it kept going longer than they expected, and slowly people started pulling back, like grief that lasted too long was somehow rude, like I was supposed to have handled it and moved on faster than a person actually can." Olivia looked up at him properly for the first time, past the uniform, past the posture, and saw something she hadn't expected. Not the calm, distant officer everyone described, but a man who had clearly carried something heavy for a very long time and had learned to carry it quietly because nobody had ever offered to help. "I'm sorry," she said and meant it. "I'm not telling you for sympathy," Nathan said. "I'm telling you because I know what it looks like when a room decides someone's pain has gone on long enough for their comfort. And I know what it costs a person to keep standing anyway." The song was ending. Olivia could feel it in the way the piano started to slow, the way the other couples were already starting to ease apart, the practiced choreography reaching its natural conclusion. She realized, with something like surprise, that she didn't want it to end yet. "Thank you," she said as the last notes faded. "For the dance." "Thank you for saying yes," Nathan said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." "I know. I saw you thinking about it." A small, real smile this time. "You've got a very expressive face for someone who's spent a year trying not to have one." Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks again, but this time it wasn't shame. It was something closer to being seen, actually seen the way she hadn't been in longer than she could easily remember. They stepped apart as the band shifted into applause, and the murmur of the crowd rose back up around them, filling in the space the music had occupied. Olivia was aware distantly of the eyes still on them. Diane's, Renee's, a dozen others. But for the first time all evening, the weight of being watched didn't feel like a verdict. It felt almost like being witnessed. "Would you like to get some air?" Nathan asked. "It's a lot in here." Olivia glanced toward the terrace doors, then back at him. "Won't that give them even more to talk about?" "Probably," Nathan said, entirely unbothered. "I stopped worrying about what this town talks about a long time ago. It's exhausting keeping a life small enough that nobody has anything to say about it. I'd rather live one worth talking about." There was something in the way he said it. Not defiance, exactly, more like a hard-earned conclusion. The kind of thing a man only says once he's tested it against real consequences, and found it still true, that settled something in Olivia's chest. "All right," she said. "Air sounds good." The terrace was quieter, the noise of the ballroom muffled behind glass doors, the harbor stretching out dark and glittering below them. The night air was cool, carrying the faint salt smell of the water, and Olivia found herself breathing easier out here than she had all evening. Nathan stood a respectful distance from her at the railing, hands loosely folded, looking out at the boats. "Can I ask you something?" Olivia said. "Go ahead." "Why me, honestly? There were at least a dozen women in there who would have said yes to that dance and not made it complicated." Nathan considered the question seriously, the way she was starting to realize he considered most things, without rushing toward the easy, flattering answer. "Because complicated is honest," he said finally. "Every other woman in there tonight is performing being fine. You're the only one who looked like she'd actually earned the right not to be, and didn't apologize for it." "That's not really an answer. It's the true one, though." He glanced at her, something careful in his expression, like he was deciding how much more to say. "I've got a 9-year-old daughter at home who watches me more closely than anyone else in my life. She's smart, sharper than she should be for her age, probably because she's had to be. And a few months back, she asked me why nobody talked to the lady from the grocery store who was always alone. Some woman she'd noticed sitting by herself at the coffee shop counter every week. I didn't have a good answer for her. I told her people get busy. She looked at me like I'd told her the sky was green." Olivia felt something twist gently in her chest. "Kids don't understand cowardice yet," Nathan went on. "They haven't learned to call it something softer. Lily just sees people either doing the kind thing or not doing it. There's no in-between in her mind. And I realized somewhere in there that I'd been teaching her to be braver than I actually was myself. Talking a good game about courage and mostly just avoiding conflict, avoiding attention, keeping my head down and my uniform clean. So tonight was a lesson for your daughter." "Tonight was a lesson for me," Nathan said. "She's not even here. I just got tired of being a man who talks about doing the right thing and never actually does it when it might cost him something." Olivia turned that over in her mind, watching the small lights of the boats bob gently on the black water. "It might cost you something," she said slowly. "Dancing with me tonight. People will talk. Some of them the kind of people who matter for your career." "Probably. Doesn't that worry you?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had the particular steadiness of a man who had already walked through this calculation and come out the other side of it. "I've spent 12 years in the Navy," he said. "I've been on ships in weather that would put most of these people on their knees praying. I've made calls that had actual lives on the other end of them, not just reputations. And you know what I've learned? The people who talk the loudest about protecting your reputation are almost never the ones who show up when it actually matters. I'd rather have a smaller circle of people who mean it than a big one that disappears the second things get uncomfortable." "That's easy to say on a terrace at night," Olivia said, not unkindly, just honestly. "Harder to hold on to when Monday comes and someone on your command asks you about it." "Maybe," Nathan admitted. "But I'd rather find out I was wrong for doing the right thing than find out I was right for doing the easy one. I've made that second mistake before." Didn't like how it felt. Olivia looked at him for a long moment. There was something almost unbearably steady about him, not the practiced calm of a man performing confidence, but something quieter and more real, the calm of a person who had already survived his worst fear and found that survival, while brutal, was possible. "Tell me about her," Olivia said. "Your daughter." And something in Nathan's whole posture shifted, not dropping the discipline exactly, but softening around it, the way a man's face changes when he moves from talking about duty to talking about the thing. "Duty is actually for Lily," he said, and just saying the name seemed to ease something in him. "She's 9. Stubborn as anything, gets that from her mother, not me, whatever people say. She still keeps a photo of Sarah, my wife, right by her bed. Every night before she goes to sleep, she says goodnight to the picture. Been doing it since she was old enough to talk. I used to think it would stop as she got older. It hasn't. I don't think it's going to." "Does that worry you?" "No," Nathan said without hesitation. "I think it means she's not forgetting. I don't want her to forget. I just want her to keep living alongside the missing her mom instead of stopping because of it. Those are two different things, and it took me a long time to understand the difference myself." "You raised her mostly alone?" "Between deployments, yeah. My mother helped when I was out. Lily's tougher than any 9-year-old should have to be, honestly. She packs her own lunch. She reads the deployment schedule better than some of the junior officers I work with. She's had to grow up fast, and some days that eats at me more than I let on." "She sounds incredible." "She is." A real smile, this time unguarded. "She's the reason I walked across that ballroom tonight, if I'm being honest. I kept thinking about what I'd want her to do 20 years from now if she walked into a room and saw someone standing alone the way you were standing alone. I'd want her to walk over. So I figured I owed it to her to actually be the kind of man who does that instead of just telling her to." Olivia felt her eyes sting unexpectedly, and she looked away toward the water, blinking it back before it could become something visible. "Nobody's talked to me like an actual person in almost a year," she said quietly. "Not like someone fragile. Not like someone to be managed. Just like a person." "You are a person," Nathan said. "A pretty capable one from what I can tell. You're still standing in a room that spent a year trying to convince you that you shouldn't be. That takes more strength than anyone in there gives you credit for." They stood in silence for a while. After that, the ballroom noise, a distant hum behind them, the harbor stretching dark and endless in front of them. Olivia found to her own surprise that she wasn't in a hurry for the silence to end. It didn't feel empty the way silence usually did when she was alone. It felt instead like the kind of quiet two people share when they've stopped performing for each other. "I should probably get back in there," she said eventually, though she made no move to leave. "Renee will have 100 questions." "Let her ask them," Nathan said. "You don't owe anyone an explanation for one dance." "You say that like it's simple." "It is simple," Nathan said. "People will make it complicated because that's what people do. Doesn't mean it has to be." Olivia allowed herself a small smile the first genuinely easy one she'd worn in longer than she could remember. "You're very sure of yourself for a man who just admitted he's spent his whole life avoiding exactly this kind of attention." "I'm not sure of much," Nathan admitted. "But I'm sure I don't regret walking over there tonight. Whatever comes of it." Yeah. When they walked back inside, the shift in the room was immediate and unmistakable. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Heads turned with the particular badly disguised curiosity of people who had spent the last 20 minutes speculating and were now hungry for new material. Diane appeared almost instantly at Olivia's side, champagne, forgotten eyes wide with barely contained questions. "Olivia, oh my God, what was that?" "A dance, Diane." Olivia kept her voice light, though she felt Nathan's presence beside her like something steadying, something that made the old anxious reflex, the urge to shrink, to apologize, to make herself smaller and less visible, feel unnecessary for the first time in months. People do still dance at these things. With Nathan Hayes. Diane's voice dropped urgent and thrilled. "Do you have any idea who that is? He doesn't do this. Ever. He comes to these things, writes his check, talks to maybe 3 people and leaves. He's never once asked anyone to dance. Not once in the 4 years I've known him." Across the room, Olivia caught sight of a cluster of officers in dress uniforms, watching Nathan with expressions that ranged from mild curiosity to something more pointed, the look of men calculating what a choice like this might mean, filing it away for later conversations she wouldn't be part of. One of them, older, silver-haired, with the kind of insignia that suggested rank well above Nathan's own, was watching with an expression Olivia couldn't quite read. Not disapproval exactly. Something more careful than that. Something that made her stomach tighten slightly on Nathan's behalf. Nathan noticed the look, too. She saw him register. It saw something flicker briefly across his face. Not fear, but awareness. The look of a man doing quick math on a cost he'd already decided he was willing to pay. "That's Captain Reyes," Nathan said quietly, following her gaze. "My commanding officer's superior. He doesn't usually attend these unless he's got a reason to." "Should I be worried about that?" Olivia asked. "No," Nathan said, though something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely certain of that himself. "Should you be worried about what people in this room think of you? Also no. Let them think whatever they want to think. I meant what I said out there." Diane, still hovering, was watching the exchange between them with an expression of undisguised fascination. "Renee's going to want the entire story," she said. "The entire story, Olivia. I mean it." "There isn't a story," Olivia said. "We danced, we talked, that's all." But even as she said it, she wasn't entirely sure it was true anymore. Something had shifted in the last 20 minutes, not dramatically. Not in any way she could easily name, but definitely unmistakably. She had walked into this ballroom feeling like a ghost haunting her own life, invisible and unwelcome. She was walking through it now feeling for the first time in almost a year like a person other people could actually see. Nathan glanced at his watch. "I need to check in with Lily's sitter soon," he said. "But it was good talking with you tonight, Olivia. Genuinely." "You too," she said, and meant it more than she expected to. He hesitated for just a moment, the first hesitation she'd seen from him all night, a small crack in the steady composure he'd worn since walking through the doors. "Can I ask you something else?" he said. "You've been asking me things all night. Might as well keep the streak going." A small smile. "Would it be all right if I called you sometime? Not as some kind of statement, just to talk. I think you'd probably tell me the truth about things more than most people in my life do, and honestly, that's rare enough that I'd like to keep it around." Olivia felt something warm move through her chest, unfamiliar, after a year of feeling mostly cold in rooms like this one. "I'd like that," she said. Nathan nodded like he'd expected the answer, but was still glad to hear it. "Good. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Olivia." "You too, Nathan." He gave her a small, respectful nod, The same economy of motion he'd carried since walking through the doors, and turned to leave, moving back through the crowd with the same unhurried purpose he'd arrived with. As he passed the cluster of officers near the bar, Olivia watched Captain Reyes step slightly into his path, saying something low that she couldn't hear. Nathan paused, listened, answered briefly. His posture, never once losing its composure, and then continued on, leaving the older officer watching after him with an expression that still wasn't quite readable. Diane was practically vibrating beside her. "Okay, you have to tell me what just happened. All of it." Olivia watched Nathan disappear through the ballroom doors out into the night, back toward a 9-year-old daughter who was waiting for him at home, who had, without ever knowing it, sent her father walking across a room tonight. "I think," Olivia said slowly, "someone finally decided I was worth talking to." She didn't know yet what it would cost him. She didn't know about the photograph that would be circulating through the base and the town by morning, taken by someone's phone from across the ballroom, capturing the exact moment his hand had closed around hers on the dance floor. She didn't know about the questions that would follow him into his commanding officer's office within the week, or the careful coded warnings that would come from men who outranked him, men who talked about optics and perception, the way other people talked about weather as though it were simply a fact of life to be managed rather than something anyone had chosen. She didn't know that Nathan Hayes, a man who had spent 12 years building a spotless, careful reputation, exactly so that no one would ever have a reason to question his judgment, had just handed that reputation a question mark on purpose in front of everyone who mattered to his career, because a 9-year-old girl had once asked him why people leave good people alone, and he hadn't had a good enough answer. All Olivia knew, standing in that ballroom with Diane's questions still hanging in the air, was that for 20 minutes tonight she had not been invisible. A quiet man in a Navy uniform had walked across a crowded room, past dozens of easier choices, and had chosen to see her. And somewhere outside, driving home through the dark toward his daughter, Nathan Hayes, was thinking the same thing about her, that he had walked into that ballroom expecting nothing more than an obligatory hour of small talk and a check written to a good cause, and had instead found the first honest conversation he'd had in longer than he wanted to admit. Neither of them yet understood that this one dance, one small deliberate act of kindness in a room built on studied indifference, was about to become the thing that tested everything Nathan had built his life around: his career, his reputation, and his own quiet, long-held belief that doing the right thing should never require an explanation. They would both find out soon enough that not everyone in that ballroom had been willing to simply let it go. Nathan drove home with the windows cracked, letting the cold air keep him sharp, but his mind kept circling back to the ballroom, to the warmth still lingering in his palm where her hand had been. By the time he pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on, and Mrs. Whitfield, the sitter, was waiting at the door with her coat already on purse over her shoulder, ready to go the second he walked in. "She's asleep," Mrs. Whitfield said. "Fought it for a while, but she went down around 9. Thank you. I owe you." "You owe me nothing, Nathan. That girl's easier to watch than most kids half her age." She paused at the door, studying him for a second longer than necessary. "You look different tonight. Long night." "Good different," she said, and left it there, letting herself out into the dark without waiting for him to explain. Nathan stood in the quiet of his living room for a moment, still in his dress uniform, feeling the strange gravity of what he'd done settle into his chest. He hadn't planned it. He hadn't walked into that ballroom with any intention beyond writing a check and shaking a few hands before slipping out early the way he always did. And yet, somewhere between the door and the window where Olivia Carter had been standing alone, something in him had simply decided, without asking his permission first, that he wasn't going to walk past her the way everyone else had. He climbed the stairs quietly, eased Lily's door open a crack, and looked in on her. She was curled on her side, one arm thrown over the stuffed rabbit she still slept with, despite insisting she was too old for it. Her mother's photograph angled toward her on the nightstand, exactly where it always was. He watched her breathe for a moment the way he always did when he came home late, needing the reassurance more for himself than for her. "Good night, Lil," he whispered, and closed the door. He didn't know yet that in less than 12 hours, a photograph would be circulating through half the base and most of the town, and that Monday morning would bring a knock on his office door he hadn't seen coming. Yeah, the knock came at 800 sharp. Nathan was at his desk reviewing personnel files when Ensign Park stuck her head in an odd, careful look on her face. "Commander wants to see you. Now if you can." Now. Nathan checked his watch. It was early even for Commander Ellis, who preferred his mornings undisturbed until at least 9. Did he say why? No, sir, just now. Nathan set down the file he'd been reading and stood smoothing the front of his uniform out of habit rather than necessity. Something in Park's expression told him this wasn't about a scheduling conflict or a training report. He walked the short hallway to Ellis's office with the particular stillness he'd learned to carry into rooms where he didn't yet know what he was walking into. Commander Ellis was standing by the window when Nathan entered, not sitting behind his desk the way he usually did, which was itself a small telling detail. Ellis was a good officer, fair by most standards, but he was also a careful man, the kind who measured every conversation for how it might read later, if repeated. "Close the door," Ellis said. Nathan did. "Sit down, Nathan." "I'll stand, sir, if that's all right." Ellis studied him for a moment, then nodded, apparently deciding not to fight that particular battle. He picked up his phone from the desk, turned the screen toward Nathan, and said nothing. It was a photograph. Nathan and Olivia on the dance floor. Her hand in his, taken from an angle across the ballroom, the kind of picture that could have looked like nothing at all if the internet hadn't already turned it into something. "This came across my feed this morning," Ellis said, along with about 40 comments underneath it. "You want to tell me what happened Saturday night?" "I danced with a woman at a charity function, sir." "That's the whole story." "That's the whole story." Ellis exhaled slowly through his nose, the sound of a man choosing his next words with real care. "You know who that is? Olivia Carter." "I do." "You know what people say about her?" "I know what people repeat about her," Nathan said, keeping his voice level. "There's a difference, sir." Ellis's eyebrows lifted slightly at that not quite surprise, more like he was recalibrating something. "Nathan, I've known you 5 years. You're the last officer on this base I'd expect to walk into something like this with his eyes closed. So I have to ask, did you understand what you were doing when you crossed that room?" "Yes, sir. I understood exactly what I was doing." "And what was that?" Nathan held his gaze. "I was asking a woman to dance because I watched an entire room decide she didn't deserve basic human decency, and I got tired of being one more person who let that happen without saying anything." Ellis was quiet for a long moment, turning that over. He wasn't an unkind man, and Nathan could see the war happening behind his eyes, a commander who respected the officer standing in front of him, weighed against a commander who had a superior of his own to answer to. "Captain Reyes mentioned it to me this morning," Ellis said finally, "before I even saw the photo myself. He wanted to know if there was anything about your personal conduct that might need his word managing before it became a distraction." "Is there, sir?" "I don't know, Nathan. Is there?" "No," Nathan said. "There's a woman I had one conversation with. There's no scandal here unless people decide to invent one, and I'm not going to organize my life around what other people decide to invent." "That's a fine principle," Ellis said, not unkindly. "It's harder to hold on to when it's your career on the table instead of somebody else's." "With respect, sir, it's not my career on the table. It's my judgment being questioned over a dance. Those aren't the same thing, even if some people want to treat them like they are." Ellis studied him for another long moment, then finally sat down behind his desk, some of the tension easing out of his shoulders, though not all of it. "I'm not writing you up, Nathan. There's nothing here to write up. But I'd be lying if I said this wasn't going to follow you for a while. Reyes doesn't forget things easily, and he's not the only one paying attention right now. You understand the position you're putting yourself in." "I understand it. And you're choosing it anyway." "Yes, sir." Ellis shook his head slowly, something almost like reluctant respect crossing his face. "You've always been the careful one, Nathan. Spotless record. No complications, no drama. I didn't expect this from you of all people. Maybe that's exactly why I did it, Nathan said. I've spent 12 years being careful. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that careful and right aren't always the same thing. Ellis didn't have an answer for that. He waved a hand toward the door, a gesture that meant the conversation was over, at least for now. Get back to work, Commander. And Nathan, watch your six on this one. Not everyone's going to be as understanding as I am. Understood, sir? Nathan walked back to his office with his pulse steadier than he expected, but his mind already turning over what Ellis had said. Not everyone's going to be as understanding. He thought of Captain Reyes's face at the bar Saturday night, the careful, unreadable expression the brief words exchanged as Nathan passed. He hadn't imagined it. Something had already been set in motion, and he had no way yet of knowing how far it would travel. Olivia found out about the photograph the same way most of the town did through Diane, who called at 8:15 in the morning, sounding equal parts scandalized and thrilled. It's everywhere, Diane said, breathless. I mean, everywhere, Olivia. Someone posted it in the community group, and it's got I don't even want to tell you how many comments. Comments about what? Olivia asked, though she already suspected the answer. About you two. About whether it's appropriate. About whether he's... Diane hesitated, clearly editing herself. About whether it looks bad for him given you know. Everything. Given what Diane... You know what I mean. Given the divorce. Given how things ended with Marcus. Diane's voice softened, slightly, guilt creeping in. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm just saying that's what people are saying. Olivia sat down slowly at her kitchen table, the phone pressed to her ear, feeling something cold settle in her stomach. She had expected some gossip. She hadn't expected it to move this fast, or to already be shaped into something about appropriateness, as though a single dance required a moral referendum. Read me one, she said. One comment. I want to hear exactly what they're saying. Olivia, I don't think... Read it, Diane. There was a pause. The sound of Diane scrolling, and then reluctantly, doesn't surprise me. She always did know how to attach herself to a good man the second the last one left. Poor Nathan doesn't know what he's getting into. Olivia closed her eyes. The words landed exactly where they were meant to land, precise, and practiced the kind of cruelty that people had gotten efficient at delivering over the past year. She had thought she was used to it. She discovered sitting at her kitchen table on a Sunday morning that she wasn't not entirely not when it came wrapped around someone else's name, too. There's more, Diane said carefully, but I don't think you need to hear it right now. No, Olivia agreed quietly. I don't. After she hung up, Olivia sat at the table for a long time, staring at nothing, turning the last 2 days over in her mind. She thought about the terrace, about the honesty in Nathan's voice when he talked about Lily, about the way he'd said, I know, when she told him she didn't need rescuing, as if he'd already understood something about her that most people in her life had never bothered to look for. She thought about calling him, telling him to walk away, to let this die down quietly, to protect the career he'd built so carefully before one dance turned into a stain he couldn't wash out. It would be the responsible thing, the considerate thing. Her phone buzzed on the table before she could decide. Nathan Hayes. She stared at the screen for 3 rings before she answered. Hello, I heard you might be having the same morning I'm having. Nathan said, his voice steady, no trace of panic in it, though she could hear something underneath the calm awareness, maybe of exactly how large this had already grown. You could say that. I'm sorry, Nathan said. I didn't think about the photo angle. Should have. Careless of me. You don't need to apologize for a photograph you didn't take. I need to apologize for not thinking about what it would cost you, Nathan said. I was thinking about what it might cost me professionally. I wasn't thinking hard enough about what it would cost you personally with people who already weren't being kind to you before this. Olivia felt something in her chest loosen slightly at that, the simple fact of a man acknowledging her side of the consequences instead of only his own. People weren't kind to me before Saturday, Nathan. They're just louder about it now. doesn't make it right." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." There was a pause on the line, and Olivia could picture him on the other end, standing somewhere quiet, choosing his next words, the way he chose everything carefully, but without hesitation, once he'd landed on them. "I talked to my commanding officer this morning," Nathan said. "He's not going to make a formal issue of it, but there are people above him who might see it differently. I want you to know that going in, because I don't think it's fair to let you find that out secondhand." "Are you regretting it?" Olivia asked, and hated slightly how much she needed to hear the answer. "No," Nathan said without hesitation. "I'm not going to pretend the timing's convenient, but I'm not sorry I danced with you, Olivia. I'd do it again tomorrow if the same room needed the same lesson." Olivia closed her eyes, feeling something behind them sting unexpectedly. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Nathan said. "I know you didn't ask to be treated the way this town's treated you. I know you've spent a year absorbing that treatment, like it was something you deserved, and I know that's not true. That's enough for me to not want to walk away, just because a few people online decided to have opinions about it. Some of those opinions are about you, though, not just me. I've survived worse than internet comments," Nathan said, and there was something dry in his tone that pulled a small surprised laugh out of her, despite everything. "Storms at sea don't care what people think of my personal life. I think I'll manage a Facebook comment section." "This isn't a joke, Nathan." "I know it isn't," he said, and the humor dropped out of his voice, replaced by something steadier, more serious. "I'm not treating it like one. I'm telling you I made a choice Saturday night, and I'm not interested in unmaking it just because it's gotten a little louder than I expected. If you want space from all this from me, I'll understand. I don't want to be one more complication in a year that's already had too many. But I'm not going to be the one who backs away first." Olivia sat with that for a long moment, the phone warm against her ear, her kitchen quiet around her, the town outside her window, carrying on with its Sunday morning unaware, or fully aware more likely of the conversation she was having. "I don't want space," she said finally, surprising herself slightly with how easily the truth came out. "I've had a year of space, Nathan. I've had more space than I know what to do with. I'm tired of it." "Then we're on the same page," Nathan said, and she could hear even through the phone something in his voice ease at her answer. "What happens now?" "Now," Nathan said, "I take my daughter to soccer practice because that's what Sunday mornings are for in this house, regardless of what the internet's doing. And if you're free later, I'd like to actually take you to dinner. Somewhere with less gossip and more food." Despite everything, the comments, the photograph, the cold feeling still sitting low in her stomach, Olivia found herself smiling genuinely for the first time since Diane's phone call had woken her into this particular Sunday. "I'd like that," she said. The dinner happened 3 nights later at a small Italian place on the edge of town that Nathan chose specifically, he admitted, because it was quiet and mostly frequented by people who didn't run in the same circles as the charity gala crowd. "Strategic," Olivia said, amused as they were seated at a corner table. "Practical," Nathan corrected. "I like good food. I don't particularly like an audience while I eat it." They talked for almost 2 hours that night. Not about the photograph, not about the comments, not about Captain Reyes, or Commander Ellis, or any of the machinery that had started turning since Saturday. They talked about smaller things, instead. The kind of things that mattered more in the long run than any of it. Olivia's work as a physical therapist, the particular satisfaction of watching a patient regain something they thought they'd lost for good. Nathan's 12 years in the Navy, the deployments that had taken him away from Lily for months at a stretch, the guilt that never fully went away, no matter how many times his mother reassured him he was doing right by his daughter. "She doesn't resent it," Nathan said of Lily, turning his water glass slowly on the table. "Or if she does, she's good at hiding it. But I know what it costs her every time I leave. I've seen the way she counts days on her calendar. 9-year-olds shouldn't have to be that good at counting." "She sounds like she loves you a great deal," Olivia said. "Kids that age don't count days for people they don't love." "I hope you're right." "I've raised a teenager," Olivia said, a small wry smile tugging at her mouth. Trust me. If Lily didn't love you, you'd know. Teenagers and I suspect 9-year-olds aren't that different, are not subtle about their disappointment. Nathan laughed at that, a real laugh, low and easy, the first one Olivia had heard from him since they'd met. Fair point. Maya Wright, your daughter. You remembered her name. I remember most things people tell me, Nathan said. Occupational habit. What's she like? 16. Sharp as a tack. She's the one who told me to come to the gala Saturday, actually. Told me I couldn't disappear from my own life just because it had gotten complicated. Olivia paused, something warm moving through her chest at the memory. I think she'd like you. She's got very little patience for people who talk around things instead of just saying what they mean. You don't seem to do a lot of talking around things. Occupational habit, Nathan said again, and this time they both laughed, something easy settling between them that Olivia hadn't expected to find this quickly, not after a year of guarding herself so carefully against exactly this kind of warmth. But even as the evening wound down, even as Nathan walked her to her car afterward, and they stood for a moment in the quiet parking lot, neither quite ready to say goodnight, Olivia could feel something else moving underneath the easy conversation. The awareness that this wasn't happening in a vacuum. That somewhere on the base, men in uniforms she'd never met were still talking about a photograph. That somewhere in town, the community group was still generating comments she'd made herself stop reading. That the ease of tonight was a small, fragile thing, sitting inside a much larger storm that hadn't finished gathering yet. Thank you for tonight, she said. I mean that. I haven't felt like myself in a long time. Tonight I did. Thank you for saying yes, Nathan said. Twice now, if we're counting. I'm counting. He looked at her for a moment, something careful and warm in his expression, and then, without pushing it any further than she seemed ready for, he simply said, Good night, Olivia, and waited until she was safely in her car before walking back to his own. She drove home with the radio off, replaying the evening in her mind, and didn't notice until she was pulling into her driveway that she'd been smiling for most of the drive without realizing it. The following Monday, the pressure Nathan had anticipated finally arrived, though not in the form he expected. He was called into a meeting with Captain Reyes directly, not through Commander Ellis, not through the usual chain, but a direct summons that told Nathan before he'd even walked through the door that this conversation had moved beyond routine concern. Reyes's office was colder than Ellis's, more formal. The walls lined with commendations and photographs from a career considerably longer than Nathan's own. Reyes didn't offer him a seat. Commander Hayes, Reyes said, folding his hands on the desk. I want to be direct with you because I think you're a direct man, and I respect that. Thank you, sir. You've built a good record here. 12 years clean file, respected by your peers, trusted by your command. That kind of record doesn't happen by accident. It happens because a man is careful about how he presents himself, both in uniform and out of it. I'm aware of my record, sir. Then you're aware of what's at stake when that record starts attracting the wrong kind of attention, Reyes said. I'm not here to lecture you about your personal life, Nathan. What you do off-duty is largely your own business. But when your personal choices start generating conversation that reaches my desk, unsolicited, mind you, I didn't go looking for this, then it stops being purely personal. It becomes a question of judgment. And judgment is precisely what we rely on you for. With respect, sir, I don't see the judgment issue. I danced with a woman at a public charity event. That's the entirety of what happened. The optics are the issue, Commander. Whether you like it or not, whether it's fair or not, this town has a narrative about that woman, and you've now attached yourself to it publicly in uniform in a way that's generating exactly the kind of speculation the Navy doesn't need connected to one of its officers. Nathan felt something harden in his chest, a familiar steadiness settling over him the way it always did right before he needed it most. Sir, if I can speak plainly. Reyes gestured for him to continue, though his expression suggested he already suspected he wouldn't like what came next. The narrative you're referring to was built entirely by people repeating unkind assumptions about a woman who did nothing wrong except get left by her husband in public. I don't think it's my job to protect a reputation that was never earned in the first place. I think it's my job to conduct myself with integrity, and I believe that's exactly what I did Saturday night. Integrity is a fine word, Commander. It doesn't pay for the consequences when perception outweighs intention. Then I suppose I'll have to live with the consequences, sir, Nathan said. But I won't apologize for the choice itself. If this office needs me to distance myself from a woman because a rumor mill decided she was inconvenient, I think that says something concerning about what this office is actually protecting. The room went very quiet. Reyes studied him for a long moment. Something unreadable moving behind his eyes, not quite anger, something closer to reassessment. A man recalculating his read on an officer he'd apparently misjudged in some fundamental way. You understand, I could make this difficult for you, Reyes said finally quietly. I understand that, sir. And you're still not backing down? No, sir, I'm not. Reyes leaned back slowly in his chair, and for a moment Nathan genuinely didn't know which direction this was going to break toward consequence or toward something else entirely. You know, Reyes said, eventually his voice losing some of its earlier edge. I had a chief petty officer once years ago who married a woman the whole base had opinions about. Widow much older than him, not much money, definitely not what anyone expected for a rising officer. Everyone told him it would sink his career. Told him exactly what I've been telling you, more or less. What happened, sir? He retired a captain 31 years later, happily married the entire time. Best judgment call he ever made, according to him. I remember thinking he was a fool for taking the risk. Reyes exhaled slowly. I'm older now. I've started to wonder if I had that backwards. Nathan said nothing, sensing the moment required silence more than response. I'm not going to pursue this any further. Commander, Reyes said finally, there's no regulation you've violated. There's no formal action to take. But I'd encourage you to think carefully about how visible you make this going forward. Not because I'm ordering you to. Because I think a man in your position deserves the chance to make that decision with clear eyes, not blind ones. Understood, sir, and thank you. Reyes nodded, dismissing him with a small wave, and Nathan walked out of that office lighter than he'd walked in, though, not without a clear understanding that the pressure hadn't vanished entirely. It had simply shifted shape, moved from something official into something quieter, more social, more difficult to fight, because it wouldn't announce itself directly. He didn't yet know that the harder test wasn't waiting for him in Reyes's office at all. It was waiting for him 3 days later at a community fundraiser he'd already committed to attending, where Olivia would be publicly confronted by someone from her old life in a way neither of them had prepared for, and where Nathan would have to decide in front of an entire room whether the quiet conviction he'd carried since that first ballroom dance could survive being tested in the open with consequences no private conversation with a commanding officer could contain. For now, though, driving home from Reyes's office with the late afternoon light slanting gold across the base, Nathan allowed himself something he hadn't felt in longer than he could easily place. Not relief exactly, but something close to it. The sense of a man who had made a hard choice and found so far that he could still stand upright inside it. He picked up his phone at a red light and typed a short message to Olivia before he could second-guess it. Survived the meeting. Still standing. Dinner again this week. Her reply came almost instantly. 3 words that made something in his chest ease all the way down. I'd like that. The fundraiser was held at the community center on Route 9, a smaller, plainer affair than the Harbor View Gala folding chairs, instead of ballroom seating, a raffle table instead of a silent auction, the kind of event that drew the town's actual residents rather than its donors. Olivia hadn't wanted to go. She'd told Nathan as much on the phone 2 nights earlier, her voice careful testing the idea before committing to it. It's a school fundraiser, Nathan. Half the parents there haven't spoken to me since the divorce. I don't need to hand them another reason to talk. You don't owe them avoidance, Nathan said. Maya's on the committee, isn't she? You told me she signed up to help run the dessert table. She did. Then you have every reason to be there and none to hide. I'll be there too, for what it's worth. It's worth something, Olivia admitted, and that had been enough in the end to get her out the door on Thursday evening in a plain green dress, standing in the doorway of the community center, with her stomach in a knot she recognized from every public appearance she'd made in the last year. Maya was already inside apron on arranging cupcakes with the brisk efficiency of a teenager who'd claimed a task and intended to do it perfectly. She spotted her mother across the room and waved bright and unself-conscious, and for a moment Olivia let that be the only thing she focused on: her daughter's face, easy and proud, unbothered by any of the noise that had followed Olivia since the gala. Nathan found her near the entrance. 20 minutes later, Lily's hand in his, the little girl craning her neck to take in the room with open curiosity. "You must be Olivia," Lily said, before Nathan could even make the introduction, sizing her up with the frank, unfiltered assessment only children seem capable of. "Dad talks about you a lot." "Lily." Nathan's voice carried a warning, though there was no real heat in it. "What you do?" Lily turned back to Olivia, entirely unbothered by her father's mild embarrassment. "He smiles at his phone now. He didn't used to do that." Olivia laughed, surprised and delighted despite the knot still sitting in her stomach. "It's very nice to meet you, Lily. Your dad's told me about you too. All good things." "Good," Lily said, satisfied, as if she'd been conducting an inspection and Olivia had passed. "Can I go find the cupcakes now?" 2, Nathan said. "Not 5. I remember last time." Lily was already gone, weaving through the crowd toward the dessert table with the single-minded focus of a 9-year-old on a mission, and Nathan watched her go with the particular soft expression Olivia had noticed he only wore when he thought no one else was paying attention. "She's wonderful," Olivia said. "She's a menace with sugar," Nathan said, but he was smiling. "Wonderful, too. Both things are true." They moved through the room together, not quite touching, but close enough that anyone paying attention could read the shape of it, and plenty of people were paying attention. Olivia felt the familiar prickle of eyes on her, the low murmur of conversation that shifted register slightly as she passed. But for the first time in months, it didn't feel like drowning. It felt survivable. Nathan had a way of standing beside her that didn't crowd her, didn't perform protection the way some men might have, but simply existed there, steady, present, an anchor she hadn't asked for and hadn't expected to need, but was grateful for anyway. It held for almost an hour. Then Marcus walked in. Olivia saw him before he saw her. Her ex-husband dressed a little too well for a school fundraiser. His new fiancée on his arm. Both of them wearing the easy confidence of people who had never once had to wonder whether they belonged in a room. Olivia's stomach dropped an old familiar reflex, the muscle memory of 100 small humiliations compressed into a single lurch of dread. "Nathan," she said quietly. He followed her gaze and understood immediately. "You want to leave?" "I don't know." "We can leave. Say the word." But before Olivia could decide, Marcus had already spotted her, and something in his expression sharpened. Not surprise exactly, more like recognition of an opportunity he hadn't expected to be handed. He said something to his fiancée low, and began making his way across the room, weaving between folding chairs and clusters of parents, with the easy practiced charm that had once made Olivia fall in love with him and now made her feel exhausted just watching it. "Olivia," Marcus said, arriving in front of them with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Maya's on the dessert committee," Olivia said, keeping her voice level. "I imagine you knew that." "Right, of course." Marcus's gaze slid to Nathan, taking him in with an assessment that was almost insultingly casual. "And you must be the Navy officer everyone's been talking about. Nathan, is it?" "Nathan Hayes." Nathan extended a hand, unhurried, unbothered. "You'd be Marcus." Marcus shook it, though something flickered across his face at the easy confidence in Nathan's tone, a man clearly used to being the one who unsettled others, finding himself for once not particularly successful at it. "I have to say," Marcus continued, turning back to Olivia, his voice dropping into something falsely gentle, the tone he'd always used right before he said something cutting, "I was surprised to hear you'd found someone so respectable. After everything. Didn't think anyone with a career to protect would want to take on all that baggage." The room hadn't gone silent, not exactly, but the conversations nearest them had thinned a few heads turning, with the particular alertness of people who sensed a scene developing and didn't want to miss it. Olivia felt her face go hot, the old shame rising fast and familiar, a year of internalized blame surging up before she could stop it. "Marcus," she started, though she didn't know yet what she intended to say, only that she needed to say something before the silence swallowed her whole. "That's an interesting choice of words," Nathan said before she could finish, his voice calm, almost conversational, but carrying an edge underneath it that made Marcus's easy smile falter slightly. "Baggage. From the man who left his wife for someone half her age and made sure the whole town found out about it before she did." "I don't think that's really your business, Commander," Marcus said, some of the smoothness slipping out of his tone. "You made it my business the moment you decided to say it in front of me," Nathan said. "But I'll tell you what I think since you asked in a roundabout way. I think a man who blows up his marriage in public and then shows up a year later to imply his ex-wife is somehow the damaged party is either remarkably unaware of himself or remarkably comfortable with cruelty. I'm not sure which is worse." A few people nearby had stopped pretending not to listen entirely now. Marcus's fiancée shifted uncomfortably beside him, her smile gone entirely. "You don't know anything about our marriage," Marcus said, color rising in his face. "I know enough," Nathan said. "I know Olivia's spent the last year being treated like a cautionary tale by half this town, while you've walked around collecting sympathy for being brave enough to move on. I know that's backwards, and I think somewhere underneath all that charm you know it too." Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again, apparently unable to find a response that wouldn't make things worse for him in front of the room, now clearly watching. Olivia stood frozen beside Nathan, her heart pounding, something complicated moving through her chest. Humiliation and gratitude and a fierce, unfamiliar protectiveness, all tangled together. "This isn't the place." Marcus finally managed, his voice tight. "You're right," Nathan said evenly. "It isn't. You started it. I'm just the one who's not going to let it end the way you wanted it to." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Marcus's fiancée touched his arm, murmured something low, and Marcus turned and walked away without another word. His easy confidence noticeably absent from his retreat, weaving quickly back through the crowd toward the exit. The room exhaled collectively, conversations resuming in a rush of hushed, urgent whispers. Olivia stood very still, staring after her ex-husband's retreating back, feeling something unfamiliar settling over her. Not quite triumph, something quieter and more foundational, the sensation of watching someone else finally say out loud in public the things she'd spent a year not allowing herself to believe. "Are you okay?" Nathan asked quietly. His hand light at her elbow. Olivia turned to look at him, and to her own surprise, felt her eyes filling not with the old shame, but with something closer to relief. "Nobody's ever done that before," she said. "Defended me like that, out loud, in front of people." "Somebody should have a long time ago," Nathan said. "I'm sorry it took this long." "You didn't have to do that. It's not your fight." "It became my fight the second he opened his mouth," Nathan said. "I don't regret it. I'd do it again." Across the room, Olivia caught sight of Maya watching them, cupcake forgotten in her hand, an expression on her face that mixed shock and something like awe. When their eyes met, Maya mouthed something Olivia couldn't quite make out, but the shape of it looked like, "Finally." The rest of the evening passed in a strange, charged, quiet people, giving Olivia looks that had shifted register entirely. No longer the careful, pitying glances of the past year, but something more curious, more assessing, as though the room had collectively decided to reconsider a story they'd all agreed on, without ever really questioning it. Diane found her near the raffle table, eyes wide. "I have never," Diane said, "in my entire life seen anyone put Marcus Carter in his place like that, in public, at a school fundraiser." "It wasn't really my doing," Olivia said, though she couldn't fully suppress the small, unfamiliar smile pulling at her mouth. "It doesn't matter whose doing it was. It happened. And half this room just watched it happen." Diane lowered her voice. "Olivia, I think people are starting to remember that Marcus wasn't exactly the victim in all this. I think tonight might have actually changed something. Olivia wasn't sure she believed that yet a year of quiet judgment didn't unravel in a single confrontation, however satisfying. But she let herself hold the possibility anyway, small and fragile, as she drove home that night with Maya in the passenger seat, both of them still buzzing from the evening. "Mom," Maya said, staring out the window. "That was kind of amazing." "Language, Maya. I mean it. Nathan he didn't even raise his voice. He just said it, like it was obvious, like everyone should have been saying it a year ago." "I know," Olivia said quietly. "Do you like him? Like actually like him?" Olivia glanced at her daughter, considering the question with more care than a 16-year-old's casual tone suggested it required. "I think I do," she said finally. "I think I like him more than I expected to this fast." "Good," Maya said, satisfied, turning back to the window. "He's the first person in like a year who's looked at you like you're not something broken." Olivia felt her throat tighten at that, the simple, devastating accuracy of a teenager's observation. She reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand at the next red light, unable to find words that would carry the weight of what she was feeling. And Maya squeezed back, and neither of them said anything else the rest of the drive home. The confrontation at the fundraiser didn't end there, though, not in the way Olivia had hoped it might. Word of what happened spread through the town almost as fast as the photograph from the gala had, but this time the narrative split cleanly down the middle. Some people like Diane seemed genuinely moved, willing to reconsider a year of quiet assumptions they'd never really examined. Others took a different position entirely, that Nathan had embarrassed a well-liked man in public, that a Navy officer had no business inserting himself into a private family matter, that his behavior, however well-intentioned, reflected poorly on his judgment. That second narrative found its way inevitably back to Captain Reyes. Nathan was summoned to his office again the following Monday, and this time there was no ambiguity in the tone of the message. Ensign Park delivered it herself, her expression carefully neutral in the way people's expressions get when they know more than they're saying. "He wants to see you at 1300, sir. Said it's not urgent, but I wouldn't be late if I were you." Nathan arrived at 12:50. Reyes was seated this time, a folder open on his desk, and he didn't look up immediately when Nathan entered, which Nathan had learned by now was rarely a good sign. "Sit down, Commander." Nathan sat. "I had an interesting phone call yesterday," Reyes said, still not looking up. "From a man named Marcus Carter. Says he wants to file a complaint. Says you berated him publicly at a school function in front of his fiancée and half the town while in a position that he believes reflects on the Navy's public image. With respect, sir, he started that exchange." "I don't doubt it," Reyes said, finally looking up, and Nathan was surprised to find something almost amused in his expression buried under the formality. "I made a few calls of my own before this meeting, talked to 3 people who were there. Every single one of them told me you didn't raise your voice, didn't threaten anyone, didn't do anything you couldn't have done in front of an admiral. Told me, in fact, that Mr. Carter said something remarkably ugly to a woman in front of a crowd, and you responded to it. Calmly, factually. That's accurate, sir." "So here's my problem, Nathan." Reyes closed the folder in front of him. "I have a man threatening to make noise about an officer defending someone's dignity in public, using true statements without losing his composure once. I don't actually have a complaint here. I have an angry ex-husband who doesn't like being called out and thinks the Navy owes him a favor for his discomfort. What happens now, sir? Now I tell him politely that there's no formal complaint to be filed because you didn't violate any code of conduct, and that if he'd like to pursue this further, he's welcome to do so through whatever appropriate channel he thinks exists, which is none." Reyes leaned back in his chair, studying Nathan, with an expression that had shifted somewhere in the last week from careful skepticism into something closer to genuine interest. "I'll be honest with you, Commander. I've been in this Navy 30 years. I've seen officers get themselves into real trouble, actual misconduct, actual poor judgment, things that damage this uniform. What you've done isn't that. What you've done is stand next to a woman the town decided to punish for a divorce that wasn't her fault and refuse to apologize for it when a man who actually did something wrong tried to make you feel guilty for noticing. Nathan said nothing uncertain where this was heading. I told you about my chief petty officer, Reyes continued. The one who married the widow everyone had opinions about. You know what I didn't tell you? I was the one who tried to talk him out of it. Told him it would end his career. I was wrong, and it's taken me most of 30 years to be willing to say that out loud. He paused. I'm not going to stand in your way on this, Nathan. Whatever this is with this woman, it's not my business to manage, and I was wrong to treat it like it was. I'd ask you to keep your conduct professional going forward, which I have no doubt you will, because you always have. But I'm done raising it as a concern. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me, Reyes said, extending a hand across the desk. Just don't make me regret this in 6 months. I won't, sir. Nathan left the office with something loosening in his chest that had been tight since the gala. Not full relief, not yet, but the sense of a storm that had against real odds mostly passed. He drove straight from the base to Olivia's, not calling first, wanting to tell her in person. She opened the door before he'd even finished knocking Maya, visible behind her at the kitchen table doing homework, and something in Nathan's face must have told her the news before he said a word. It's over, he said. The complaint. Reyes shut it down. Said there was nothing to shut down in the first place. Olivia stood in the doorway for a moment, absorbing that, and then something in her seemed to release all at once. A full year of held breath finally let go. She stepped forward and, without quite deciding to, wrapped her arms around him, her face pressed briefly against his shoulder. Thank you, she said, muffled, for not backing down. I told you I wouldn't. Nathan's arms came around her, careful, steady. I meant it. Behind them from the kitchen table, Maya's voice carried dry and amused despite the moment. You guys know I can see you, right? Olivia laughed, pulling back, wiping quickly at her eyes, and Nathan grinned over her shoulder at the teenager, watching them with an expression that was trying very hard to look unbothered and mostly failing. Homework, Maya. It's basically done. I'm just watching the show now. Jechan. That evening, after Maya had retreated to her room and Nathan had gone home to relieve the sitter, Olivia sat alone at her kitchen table for a long time, turning the last 2 weeks over in her mind. It felt strange, almost unbelievable, how quickly things had shifted from a year of careful invisibility to a public confrontation, a defended reputation, a man who'd risked something real to stand beside her twice now without flinching. She thought about calling Nathan again just to hear his voice. But something else pulled at her, instead a restlessness she hadn't examined too closely, a small, persistent worry that had been sitting underneath the relief all evening. Reyes had backed off. Marcus had retreated. But she knew from a year of hard experience that towns like this one didn't fully let go of a story just because one confrontation had gone in someone's favor. There would be more talk, more opinions, more people deciding from a comfortable distance what her life should look like. And there was Lily to think about, too, a 9-year-old who'd looked up at Olivia at the fundraiser cupcake, forgotten with open curiosity, and Olivia suspected the early stages of real attachment. That wasn't nothing. That came with its own weight, its own responsibility. A child who had already lost one mother and didn't need to be handed a reason to lose someone else if this didn't work. She was still sitting with all of it, the phone in her hand, when a text came through from Nathan. Lily wants to know if you'll come to her school thing Friday. Some kind of presentation. Says you have to say yes because she already told her teacher you're coming. Olivia stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the shape of what it meant. Not just an invitation to an event, but an invitation into something larger. A life that included a 9-year-old who had already apparently decided Olivia belonged in it. She thought about the year behind her, the empty invitations, the shrinking guest list, the particular loneliness of being technically surrounded by people who had quietly decided she didn't matter anymore. And she thought about the ballroom, the terrace, the fundraiser, Nathan's steady voice cutting through Marcus's cruelty, without ever raising in volume Lily's blunt, unguarded curiosity, Maya's small, satisfied smile from the kitchen table. Tell her I wouldn't miss it, she typed back. The reply came almost immediately. She's currently doing a victory lap around the living room. You've made her whole week. Olivia smiled at her phone alone in her quiet kitchen and felt something in her chest that she hadn't let herself feel in longer than a year. Not just relief, not just gratitude, but something that looked unmistakably like the early shape of hope. She didn't yet know that Friday's school presentation would bring its own complications, that Lily standing in front of her class, with the particular fearless honesty only children possess, would say something about her father and Olivia that would travel through the parent community faster than either adult could manage. Forcing Nathan to make a choice he hadn't fully prepared for about how public he was willing to let this new life become, and how much he was willing to risk to protect it. For now, though, sitting at her kitchen table with her daughter's laughter drifting faintly down the hallway and a text conversation still glowing on her phone, Olivia allowed herself for the first time in nearly a year to simply be happy without waiting for the other shoe to drop. It wouldn't last long, but it was hers, and after everything that felt like enough. Friday morning, Lily's third-grade class held what her teacher called Family Spotlight, a small informal presentation where each student stood in front of the room and talked for a few minutes about someone important in their life. It wasn't a big production. Mrs. Alvarez had been doing it for years. She explained to the handful of parents who showed up a simple exercise meant to build confidence and give the kids a chance to talk about the people who mattered to them. Nathan sat in a small chair, clearly built for a much smaller body, knees nearly at his chest. Olivia beside him in an equally undersized seat. Both of them trying not to laugh at the absurdity of two adults folded into furniture meant for 8-year-olds. Lily was 3 rows up, practically vibrating with anticipation, glancing back at them every few seconds to make sure they were still there. "She's been rehearsing all week," Nathan murmured to Olivia. "Made me listen to it 4 times last night. I have no idea what she's actually going to say. She wouldn't let me hear the final version." Should I be worried? With Lily, always a little. When Mrs. Alvarez called her name, Lily marched to the front of the room with the total lack of self-consciousness only a 9-year-old fully convinced of her own material could manage. She had a single index card in her hand, though she barely glanced at it. "My name is Lily Hayes," she announced, "and I'm going to talk about my dad. And also a little bit about Olivia because Mrs. Alvarez said I could talk about more than one person if it's important." A ripple of soft laughter moved through the small crowd of parents. Olivia felt Nathan go very still beside her. "My dad is in the Navy," Lily continued, "and he's gone a lot, which used to make me really sad, but he always calls even from the middle of the ocean, which is pretty cool when you think about it, because the ocean doesn't have Wi-Fi as far as I know." More laughter. Lily grinned, clearly enjoying the reaction, and pressed on. "My mom died when I was 3. I don't really remember her, but I have a picture and my dad tells me stories about her so I don't forget. He says forgetting isn't the same as moving on, and that I'm allowed to do both." The room had gone quieter now, the laughter fading into something more attentive. Olivia felt her chest tighten, glancing sideways at Nathan, whose jaw had set in a way she was beginning to recognize the particular stillness of a man holding something carefully so it didn't spill over in public. "My dad used to be really quiet all the time," Lily said. "Like he'd smile and stuff, but it was a tired kind of smile. Like he was doing his best, but it was hard. And then, a few weeks ago, he met Olivia, and now he smiles at his phone, which is a completely different kind of smile. It's a happy one. I can tell the difference." A few of the parents exchanged small, knowing glances. Olivia felt her face go warm. "Olivia's really nice." Lily continued, warming to her subject, now entirely unbothered by the room's attention. "She listens to me when I talk, like actually listens. Not the kind where grown-ups just nod and think about something else. And she came to my soccer game last Saturday, even though it was raining, and she didn't have to. And my dad's been way less tired since she started coming around. So I guess what I'm saying is my dad's a really good dad, even when he's sad. And I think he deserves someone who makes him less sad. That's it. That's my family spotlight." Lily returned to her seat to a round of genuine, warm applause, several parents wiping at their eyes. Mrs. Alvarez pressing a hand briefly to her chest before calling the next student. Nathan didn't move for a long moment, staring straight ahead, and Olivia reached over and took his hand without saying anything. Feeling the tension in it, slowly ease. She wasn't supposed to say all that, Nathan said quietly, once the next student had begun their presentation. I didn't know she was going to say all that. She meant every word of it, Olivia whispered back. You should be proud. That was brave. I'm mortified and proud at the same time. I didn't know those two feelings could coexist this intensely. Welcome to parenting a smart kid, Olivia said, and Nathan laughed under his breath, quiet enough not to disturb the presentation still going on. But real, the tension in his shoulders finally breaking. The trouble when it came arrived not through the school itself, but through the parents who had been sitting in that room, several of whom knew Marcus's fiancée, and several more of whom had opinions about a Navy officer's motherless daughter being used as one particularly unkind post in the community group. Later phrased it as emotional leverage for a relationship half this town already has questions about. Olivia saw the post before Nathan did. Diane sent it to her Friday evening apologetic, but insistent that Olivia needed to know, and Olivia read it twice, feeling something cold settle back into her stomach that she'd thought for a few days might finally be gone for good. Sweet that a little girl misses her mom and is looking for a replacement, but is anyone else uncomfortable that a grown man is letting his 9-year-old do the emotional work of endorsing his new girlfriend in front of a room full of parents? Feels manipulative whether he meant it that way or not. Underneath it, a string of comments, some defending Nathan more than Olivia expected, but enough attacking him that the cumulative effect landed hard regardless. She read through them slowly, feeling each one settle into the same old place, the place a year of similar comments had worn smooth and tender. She called Nathan before she'd fully decided what she wanted to say. You need to see something, she said when he picked up. Read it to me. She did her voice flat, trying to strip the words of the weight they carried before they even finished leaving her mouth. There was a long silence on the other end of the line when she finished. They think I coached her, Nathan said, finally, his voice low and tight in a way Olivia hadn't heard from him before. They think I used my daughter. Some of them do, not all of them. All. Enough of them. Nathan exhaled hard. Olivia, I didn't know what she was going to say. I told you that. I had no idea she was going to talk about you at all, let alone like that. I believe you, but it doesn't matter if I believe it does it. It matters what they've decided to believe. Something bitter crept into his voice, an anger Olivia hadn't seen from him before, controlled but unmistakably present. I spent 12 years building a reputation for being careful, for never giving anyone a reason to question my judgment. And in the span of 2 weeks, I've become the officer who paraded his motherless daughter around to legitimize a relationship. That's what they're saying. That's actually what they're saying about my kid. Nathan? I need to go check on her, he said abruptly. I'll call you back. He hung up before Olivia could say anything else, and she sat holding her silent phone, feeling the fragile warmth of the last 2 weeks curdle into something anxious and uncertain. She thought of Lily standing at the front of that classroom, with total unguarded sincerity, saying true things in the honest way only children manage, having absolutely no idea that her honesty would become ammunition in a fight she didn't know existed. Nathan found Lily in her room that evening, sitting on her bed with a book open in her lap that she wasn't actually reading, her eyes fixed somewhere past the page. Hey, Bug. He sat down on the edge of the bed. You okay? I heard you on the phone, Lily said, not looking up. You sounded mad. Nathan felt his stomach drop. He'd been careful, he thought, keeping his voice down, but apparently not careful enough. I wasn't mad at you. Then who? Nathan considered his answer carefully, the way he considered most things involving his daughter, weighing honesty against the instinct to protect her from things she was too young to carry. Some people online said some things about your family spotlight today, about you talking about Olivia. Lily finally looked up, her small face creasing with confusion. Did I do something wrong? No, Nathan said immediately firmly. No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. You said something true and kind and brave, and I was proud of you the entire time you were up there. Some grown-ups they like to find things to be upset about, even when there's nothing actually wrong. Was it wrong that I talked about Olivia? Mrs. Alvarez said I could talk about more than one person. It wasn't wrong at all, Nathan said. It made me really happy, actually. I just don't want you thinking even for a second that you did something bad, because you didn't. Some people are just uncomfortable when other people are honest. That's their problem, not yours. Lily studied him for a moment, with the particular seriousness she reserved for questions that actually mattered to her. Do you like Olivia? Like really like her? Because I told everyone you did, and I don't want to have been wrong. Nathan felt something in his chest crack open, gentle and unguarded, and he reached over to smooth a piece of hair back from his daughter's forehead. I really like her, Lily. You weren't wrong about anything. Good, Lily said, satisfied, closing her book at last. Because I liked her a lot too, and I don't say that about a lot of grown-ups. I've noticed. Mrs. Whitfield doesn't count. She's basically family already. Nathan laughed, despite everything, the tightness in his chest easing slightly at his daughter's blunt, uncomplicated honesty. The same honesty that had gotten them into this particular mess, and the same honesty he wouldn't have traded for anything. Get some sleep, Bug. You did great today. I mean that. He kissed her forehead and turned off the light, but he sat for a long moment in the hallway outside her door afterward, phone in his hand, anger and protectiveness churning together in a way he hadn't fully experienced before, not on his own behalf, which he could weather, but on hers, which felt entirely different, sharper, harder to set aside. He called Olivia back an hour later, his voice steadier now, though something in it still carried the day's weight. I'm sorry I hung up on you, he said. You don't need to apologize. I do. I was angry, and I took it out on the phone call instead of the people who actually deserved it. He exhaled slowly. I talked to Lily. She's fine. Better than fine, actually. She just wanted to make sure she hadn't done anything wrong, and once I told her she hadn't, she moved on like it was nothing. Kids are remarkably resilient about things that would flatten an adult. I'm glad she's okay. I'm not okay, though, Nathan admitted. I keep thinking about it. About how fast people jumped to the worst possible interpretation of my own daughter being honest in a classroom. It's one thing when they come after me. I signed up for a life where people have opinions about my judgment. She didn't sign up for anything. She's 9. What do you want to do? There was a long pause on the line, and Olivia could hear him breathing, working through something. I don't know yet, he admitted. Part of me wants to pull back, keep things quieter, not because I'm ashamed of anything, but because I don't want my daughter turned into a talking point every time something good happens in our lives. That doesn't feel fair to her. Olivia felt something cold settle in her chest at that. The old familiar fear rising fast. The fear that this too would end the way everything else had this past year, with someone deciding reasonably carefully that the cost of standing beside her simply outweighed the benefit. I understand if that's what you need to do, she said quietly, though the words cost her more than she let show. That's not what I said, Nathan said, quickly catching something in her tone. I said part of me wants that. Another part of me, the bigger part, I think knows that pulling back because a handful of strangers online decided to be cruel is exactly the kind of thing I told you I wasn't going to do. I don't want to teach Lily that the answer to unfair criticism is retreat. I've spent her whole life trying to teach her the opposite. So what does that leave? It leaves us figuring out how to be together without making my daughter the centerpiece of it, Nathan said. That's on me to manage, not something you or she should have to think about. I should have been clearer with her beforehand about what she could and couldn't share publicly. That's a parenting gap, not a relationship problem. Olivia was quiet for a moment, absorbing that feeling. The fear ease slightly replaced by something more complicated admiration, mostly for a man who kept finding ways to take responsibility without assigning blame to anyone else in the process. For what it's worth, she said, I don't think you did anything wrong either. She's a kid who loves her father and noticed he was happier. That's not manipulation. That's just a child paying attention. I know that logically, Nathan said. It still stings hearing people suggest otherwise about your own kid. I know, Olivia said softly. I've had a year of people suggesting things about me that weren't true either. It never stops stinging exactly. You just get better at carrying it. I don't want you to have to keep carrying it, though. Not because of us. Nathan. Olivia's voice was steady now, firmer than it had been all conversation. I chose this. I chose you, and I chose Lily. The second she told me, my dad smiles at his phone now. I'm not interested in being protected from consequences. I decided we're worth it. There was a silence on the line, warm and full, in a way silences between them had started to become, and when Nathan spoke again, his voice had softened considerably. You're something else, you know that. So I've been told, mostly by a 9-year-old recently. Nathan laughed low and real, and something in the tension of the day finally fully released. I'll talk to Lily about what's okay to share publicly going forward. Gently. I don't want her to feel censored. I just want her to understand that not everyone deserves access to our lives even when she's proud of them. That sounds right. And I'm not backing off. Nathan added, quieter now, more deliberate. From you. From this. I want to be clear about that because I don't want you sitting there tonight wondering if today changed anything. It didn't, Olivia said, and found saying it that she meant it completely. If anything, it made me want to stay closer, not further away. Good, Nathan said. Because I feel exactly the same. The following week brought its own strange resolution, arriving from a direction neither of them expected. Mrs. Alvarez, Lily's teacher, called Olivia directly on Tuesday afternoon, an unusual move, and Olivia answered warily, bracing for another complication. I wanted to call myself, Mrs. Alvarez said, because I saw the comments in that parent group, and I think what happened is genuinely unfair, and I wanted you to hear that from someone who was actually in the room. I appreciate that, Olivia said, surprised. Lily's presentation was the most honest thing I've heard in that classroom in 15 years of doing this exercise, Mrs. Alvarez continued. Kids that age don't manipulate. They don't have the sophistication for it, and frankly, most of them don't have the motive. She said what she said because it's true, because she's watched her father come alive again after years of quiet grief, and because she's old enough to notice and young enough to say it out loud, without worrying what anyone would think. I'd like to see more parents raise their children with that kind of honesty, not fewer. Olivia felt something loosen in her chest. Gratitude rising unexpectedly at the simple, unsolicited kindness of a stranger, willing to say the true thing out loud, the same way Nathan had at the fundraiser. Would you be willing to say that publicly? Olivia asked, testing the idea carefully. Not for our sake necessarily. For Lily's. I don't want her thinking her honesty made things worse. I already did, Mrs. Alvarez said. Posted it in the parent group about an hour ago. Figured a teacher's perspective might carry a little weight in a conversation that's mostly been strangers speculating about a family they don't actually know. By Wednesday evening, the tenor of the community group had shifted noticeably. Not entirely. Not for everyone, but enough that the loudest critics found themselves increasingly outnumbered by parents who'd been at the presentation and remembered it exactly the way Mrs. Alvarez described it. A little girl talking honestly about watching her father heal. Diane called again that evening, her voice bright with something like vindication. It's turning, Olivia. I really think it's turning. People are starting to say what they should have been saying a year ago, that you didn't do anything wrong, that Marcus was the one who blew everything up, that maybe this town owes you an apology instead of a year of side-eye. I don't need an apology, Olivia said, though something in her chest eased at the words anyway. I just needed people to stop deciding things about me without actually knowing anything. Well, I think that's finally starting to happen. Diane paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry too. I should have shown up better for you this year. I let myself get swept up in the same nonsense everyone else did, and I regret it. Olivia felt tears prick unexpectedly at the admission, not because she needed it exactly, but because after a year of near-total isolation, hearing someone name the failure out loud without her having to ask for it meant more than she'd expected. Thank you for saying that, she said. I mean it. I mean it too. I want to be a better friend going forward, starting now. I'd like that. Nathan showed up at her door that Thursday evening, unannounced, Lily in tow. both of them carrying takeout bags from the Italian place they'd gone to on their first real dinner together. "We come bearing food and an apology," Nathan announced as Olivia opened the door, surprised and pleased. "An apology for what?" "For showing up unannounced," Lily said, pushing past her father into the house with the easy confidence of a child who'd clearly decided this was now a familiar place. "Dad said we should call first, but I told him surprises are better." "She's not wrong," Nathan admitted, following his daughter inside. "Also, we wanted to actually celebrate. Things have been rough this week. I thought we could use a good night." They ate at Olivia's kitchen table, Maya joining them halfway through, the four of them settling into an easy, unforced rhythm that felt to Olivia's quiet astonishment almost like something she recognized from years ago. The particular warmth of a table full of people who wanted to be there, who weren't performing anything, who simply enjoyed each other's company, without needing it to mean anything more complicated than that. Lily and Maya fell into an unlikely immediate friendship. The 9-year-old peppering the 16-year-old with questions about high school, with the fearless curiosity Olivia was coming to recognize as entirely characteristic, and Maya, to her credit, answered every single one with real patience, clearly charmed, despite the 7-year age gap. "This is nice," Nathan said quietly, leaning toward Olivia, while the girls talked animatedly across the table. "I haven't had a night like this in longer than I can remember." "Neither have I," Olivia admitted. "I keep thinking about the ballroom," Nathan said. "How close I came to just writing a check and going home that night. If I'd done that, none of this would exist. This table, this whole thing." "But you didn't." "No," Nathan said, watching Lily gesture animatedly about something, Maya laughing in response. "I didn't. Best decision I've made in years, and I almost talked myself out of it before I even crossed the room." Olivia reached over and took his hand under the table, feeling the warmth of it, the steadiness that had carried both of them through 2 very difficult weeks. "I'm glad you didn't talk yourself out of it," she said. "Me too," Nathan said. "Though I'll admit I didn't think it would come with quite this much turbulence attached." "Worth it." Nathan looked at her for a long moment, something unguarded and certain in his expression. "Every single bit of it," he said. "And I don't think we're finished yet either. This town's got a long memory. I have a feeling we haven't seen the last complication." He wasn't wrong. Even as the evening wound down, even as the girls cleared plates together with a kind of easy teamwork that made Olivia's chest ache with something close to hope, a different kind of pressure was already beginning to build several miles away in an office at the base where a name Nathan hadn't thought about in months was about to resurface, an old case file, an old decision, a piece of his past that had nothing to do with Olivia at all, but was about to collide with this new life in a way neither of them could have anticipated, threatening to test. Not just his reputation this time, but everything he'd built his entire career around proving he could be trusted to do. For now, though, in the warm, ordinary chaos of a kitchen full of people who mattered to each other, none of that had arrived yet. There was only the sound of dishes being stacked, of Lily's bright laughter carrying through the house, of Maya rolling her eyes fondly at something the younger girl said, and Nathan's hand still warm around Olivia's under the table, steady present, unwilling to let go. The name was Petra Simmons, and it had been sitting in a personnel file untouched for almost 6 years before it resurfaced on Nathan's desk that Friday morning, forwarded by Ensign Park, with a short note that only said, "This came in through JAG. Thought you'd want to see it before it went any further up the chain." Nathan read the memo twice before it fully landed. A routine records audit, the kind the Navy ran periodically across old deployments, had flagged a discrepancy in a report Nathan had filed 6 years earlier. A supply requisition during a deployment off the coast of Bahrain, signed off under his authority, that didn't match up cleanly with the ship's later inventory. It was almost certainly nothing. Paperwork errors like this happened constantly, clerical mismatches that got sorted out in a week once someone pulled the right records. But almost certainly, nothing wasn't nothing, and the timing of it arriving less than a month after Nathan's name had already circulated through Captain Reyes's office twice felt to Nathan's practiced instincts less like coincidence and more, like opportunities someone had decided to make use of. He called Commander Ellis before he'd even finished reading the memo a third time. "I saw it," Ellis said before Nathan could explain. "JAG flagged it routine, but I'll be straight with you, Nathan. Given the last month, I don't think anything involving your name is going to stay routine. People are watching you closer than they used to. That cuts both ways. Might mean this gets resolved faster because eyes are already on it. Might also mean somebody with an axe to grind decides to make more of it than it deserves." "You think this is connected to Olivia Reyes?" "I think Reyes backed off you clean, and I believe him when he says he's done raising it. But Reyes isn't the only officer on this base who noticed you dancing at that gala, Nathan. Some of them agreed with what you did. Some of them thought it was reckless. And reckless officers in some people's minds deserve a closer look at everything else in their file. That's not fair. It's also not unusual." Nathan sat with that for a long moment after hanging up the old requisition report open on his screen. 6 years of careful, spotless service suddenly narrowed down to a single discrepancy that could, if handled poorly, unravel far more than a dance ever could. He thought about calling Olivia immediately, then stopped himself unsure, yet what there was to tell her beyond uncertainty, unwilling to hand her another thing to worry about before he understood the shape of it himself. He spent the weekend pulling old records instead, cross-referencing shipping manifests against his own memory of a deployment that felt 6 years later like it belonged to someone else's life. By Sunday night, sitting at his kitchen table with Lily, long asleep upstairs, he found what he was looking for: a transfer authorization buried 3 folders deep, signed not by him, but by a lieutenant junior grade who'd since left the Navy, entirely explaining the exact discrepancy JAG had flagged. It wasn't his error. It had never been his error. It was a filing mistake from 6 years ago that had simply never been corrected, sitting dormant until an audit and an inconvenient month of visibility brought it back into the light. He should have felt relief. Instead, sitting alone in his quiet kitchen at 11 at night, he felt something closer to exhaustion, the particular fatigue of a man who had spent his entire career being careful, specifically to avoid moments like this, only to discover that carefulness bought him nothing once people had already decided to look for reasons to doubt him. He called Olivia the next morning, laying it out plainly, the way he'd learned she preferred things laid out. "It's nothing," he said. "I found the paperwork. It clears me completely, but it's going to take a week or two to work through the official channels, and until it does, there's a chance people hear audit flagged a discrepancy in Commander Hayes' file before they hear the part where it turns out to be nothing." "Are you worried?" "Not about the outcome," Nathan admitted. "I know what actually happened. I'm worried about the story getting ahead of the facts again, same way it did with us. People remember headlines. They don't always stick around for corrections." "Welcome to my world," Olivia said, not unkindly, and Nathan let out a short, tired laugh. "Fair point. What do you need from me?" "Nothing, honestly. I just didn't want you finding out secondhand the way I found out about the photograph after the gala. I've learned that lesson at least." "I appreciate that," Olivia said. "For what it's worth, I'm not going anywhere, whatever this turns into." "I know," Nathan said, and found saying it that he actually believed it a certainty that would have been impossible for him to feel about anyone a month ago, and now felt as solid and unremarkable as the ground under his feet. The audit resolved exactly the way Nathan expected it to, though not before word of it made its slow, inevitable crawl through the base, and from there into the parent group and community pages that had already spent a month treating Nathan Hayes as a subject of ongoing interest. The framing, predictably, was uglier than the facts warranted a few posts speculating about financial irregularities that didn't exist. A few commenters connecting dots that had never actually been dots to begin with, simply because a Navy officer's name and the word audit appearing in the same sentence made for more compelling gossip than the mundane truth. Olivia watched it happen with a strange, disorienting sense of déjà vu. The same machinery that had chewed through her reputation for a year now, grinding against Nathan's the same speed, the same certainty from people who knew nothing beyond a headline. The difference this time was that she wasn't standing alone watching it happen to herself. She was standing beside someone else while it happened to him, and she discovered in the process an entirely new flavor of helplessness, the particular ache of wanting to protect someone from something you had no power to stop. "I hate this," she told Nathan, the two of them sitting on her back porch on a cool evening while the kids did homework inside. "I hate that you're going through exactly what I went through and I can't do anything to fix it." "You're doing something," Nathan said. "You're here. That's not nothing. It doesn't feel like enough. It's more than I had for most of the last 6 years," Nathan said quietly. "I went through Sarah's illness mostly alone, if we're being honest. People showed up for the first 2 months and then quietly disappeared once it stopped being convenient. I got used to weathering hard things without anyone actually standing next to me while I did it. This is different. You being here worried on my behalf, that's not nothing, Olivia. That's actually the whole thing." Olivia felt her throat tighten, the simple honesty of it landing harder than she expected. "I keep thinking about what Marcus said at the fundraiser. About baggage." "Don't," Nathan said, firm but gentle. "That man doesn't get to define what either of us carries. He gave up that right the second he decided honesty mattered less than his own comfort. I know, it still echoes sometimes." "I understand that," Nathan said. "I've got my own echoes. Every time something like this audit comes up, some part of me still hears Reyes's first warning, still wonders if this is the thing that finally proves him right, that I made a reckless choice that's going to cost me everything I built. It doesn't go away just because you know logically that it's not true. How do you keep going then? Keep standing in it?" Nathan considered the question seriously, the way he considered most things that mattered. "I think about Lily," he said finally. "About what I want her watching. If I fold every time something gets difficult, I'm teaching her that difficulty means you were wrong to try in the first place. I don't believe that. I've never believed that. So I keep standing even when it would be easier not to, because the alternative is teaching my daughter a lesson I don't actually believe is true." Olivia reached over and took his hand. The porch quiet around them, except for the faint muffled sound of the girls' laughter drifting through the screen door. "I think that's the bravest thing about you," she said. "Not that you're not scared, that you keep going anyway." "I learned it from you, actually," Nathan said. "Watching you stand in that ballroom alone, still showing up to your own life, even when it would have been easier to disappear. I don't think I fully understood what that cost until I started paying a version of the same price myself." They sat together in the quiet for a long while after that, not needing to fill the silence with anything more, the kind of comfortable stillness that had become over the past month. One of the things Olivia trusted most about being with him. The audit cleared formally 11 days later, JAG issuing a brief, unambiguous statement confirming the discrepancy had originated from a filing error, predating Nathan's involvement, entirely closing the matter without further action. Commander Ellis called Nathan personally to deliver the news, his voice carrying real warmth for the first time in weeks. "Clean," Ellis said. "Completely clean. I want that on record, Nathan, because I know this month's been hard on you, and I want you hearing it plainly. There was never anything here. You did nothing wrong. Not with the requisition, not with the woman, not with any of it." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. Just for what it's worth, watching you handle this month has taught me something. I've been in this Navy almost as long as Reyes has, and I don't know that I've seen an officer weather this much scrutiny with this little compromise to his integrity. That's worth something. I hope you know that." Nathan hung up the phone and sat for a moment in his office, feeling something in his chest finally fully release, not just relief at the audit's resolution, but something larger, the sense of a month-long test finally reaching its end. He thought about calling Olivia immediately, and then on impulse decided something else instead. He picked Lily up from school that afternoon, and instead of driving home, he took her to the small diner near the base where they sometimes went for what Lily called big talks, a booth in the corner, milkshakes, the particular kind of conversation that happened easier over food than across a dinner table. "Am I in trouble?" Lily asked immediately, sliding into the booth with visible suspicion. "No, Bug, not even a little." "Then why are we here? You only take me here for big talks." Nathan smiled at how well she'd learned him. "I wanted to ask you something. About Olivia. Lily's expression shifted instantly into focused interest. Are you going to marry her? That's not exactly the question I was going to ask, but let's start there. Would that be okay with you, if someday, not right now, but someday, I asked her to marry me? Lily considered this with the total seriousness she brought to questions that mattered to her, stirring her milkshake slowly while she thought. Would she still let me visit, even if you guys got married and stuff changed? Nothing about how much she loves spending time with you would change Lily. If anything, it'd probably mean more time together, not less. Would Maya be like my sister then? Even though she's way older. I think Maya would like that a lot, actually, Nathan said. She seems pretty fond of you already. Lily nodded slowly, apparently satisfied with the trajectory of the conversation. Then yeah, I think that'd be okay. Actually, I think that'd be really good. She paused, milkshake spoon hovering. Are you scared to ask her? Nathan laughed, caught off guard by his daughter's characteristic directness. A little, yeah. Why, she likes you. Anyone can tell. She looks at you the same way you look at her. I don't know if it's fear of her saying no exactly, Nathan said, choosing his words carefully, treating the question with the same seriousness Lily had brought to hers. I think it's more that this last month's shown me how much can go wrong. How many people are ready to make things harder than they need to be. I want to build something solid before I ask her to build it with me permanently. I want to be sure. You already seem pretty sure, Lily said, with the blunt confidence of a child who had watched closely exactly what Nathan had been trying and mostly failing to hide for weeks now. You smile at your phone. You hum in the car now. You haven't hummed in the car since before Mom died. Nathan felt something catch in his chest at that observation, quiet and devastatingly precise. You notice that? I notice everything, Lily said entirely without irony, and Nathan laughed again. Warmer this time, something loosening in him that had been tight for weeks. Okay, he said. Then I think I know what I need to do. He didn't rush it. He'd learned enough over the past month to know that the things worth building were worth building carefully, without the same rushed urgency that had characterized so much of the town's reaction to his and Olivia's relationship from the very beginning. He waited until the audit had fully cleared, until the community group's interest had cooled into something closer to background noise, until an ordinary Tuesday evening arrived that carried no weight beyond its own quiet ordinariness. The kind of evening he'd come to believe that actually mattered more than any grand gesture could. He asked Olivia to dinner at the same small Italian place from their first date the corner table reserved, though he said nothing about the significance of the choice, letting her arrive and simply notice it herself. You brought me back here, she said, settling into the booth, something warm crossing her face at the recognition. Seemed right, Nathan said. This is where I first understood I liked spending time with you more than I'd expected to. Figured it deserved a second chapter. They ate slowly, talking about nothing urgent. Maya's upcoming college applications, Lily's insistence on trying out for the school play, the ordinary texture of two lives that had somewhere in the past 2 months become genuinely intertwined rather than merely adjacent. It was only after the plates were cleared, the check settled, that Nathan reached into his jacket pocket and set a small velvet box on the table between them. Unadorned. No elaborate speech prepared, just the plain, steady honesty that had characterized everything about him since the moment he'd crossed that ballroom 2 months earlier. Olivia went very still, staring at the box, then up at him. Nathan. I'm not going to pretend this has been an easy 2 months, Nathan said. It hasn't. We've had a photograph turn into a controversy, an ex-husband turn into a public confrontation, my own career questioned twice over things that turned out to be nothing. I know that's not exactly the smooth beginning either of us might have pictured. No, Olivia said softly. It's not. But every single time something got hard, you didn't disappear, Nathan continued. You stood in it with me, and I did the same for you, And somewhere in the middle of all that difficulty, I found something I didn't expect to find again. Not after Sarah. Not after I'd resigned myself to being a father who came home to an empty house between deployments and called that enough. I don't want to call it enough anymore, Olivia. I want more. I want you and I want Lily to keep growing up watching you be part of our lives, and I want to build something with you that this town or anyone else doesn't get a vote in. I love you. I'd like to marry you if you'll have me. Olivia's eyes were wet. Her hand pressed briefly to her mouth, and for a long moment, she didn't say anything at all, simply looking at him across the small table. The same table where 2 months ago they'd sat as near strangers, cautiously discovering each other over shared honesty about grief and daughters and the particular loneliness of being left behind by people who should have known better. "Yes," she said finally, her voice thick. "Yes, Nathan. Of course, yes." He reached across the table and took her hand, sliding the ring onto her finger with hands that weren't quite steady, despite 12 years of discipline that had taught him to keep his composure through far more dangerous moments than this one. Around them, a few nearby diners had noticed a small ripple of applause rising from a table across the room, but neither of them paid it much attention, too absorbed in each other to care for once who was watching. Ciao. They told the girls together that same night, gathering Maya and Lily in Olivia's living room, both children sensing immediately from the barely contained excitement on their parents' faces that something significant had happened. "Are you engaged?" Maya asked immediately, eyes going wide before either adult had said a word. "How did you—" Olivia started. "Mom, you're glowing. It's not subtle." Lily let out a shriek of pure delight, launching herself across the room to hug first her father, then Olivia. Then, after a moment's consideration, Maya as well, apparently deciding the celebration should extend to everyone present. "I knew it," she announced. "I told Dad at the diner. I said he already seemed sure." "You had a diner conversation about this and didn't tell me?" Olivia asked, laughing, looking at Nathan with mock accusation. "I needed to make sure I had the most important approval first," Nathan said, grinning, pulling Lily into a one-armed hug. "Figured her opinion mattered more than most people's in this town given everything." "Damn right it does," Lily said, and both adults laughed at the phrase clearly borrowed from somewhere she shouldn't have picked it up, neither quite finding the energy to correct her in the moment. Maya, watching the scene with an expression that mixed genuine happiness with something more thoughtful, caught Olivia's eye across the room. "You look happy, Mom. Actually happy. Not the fake kind you did for a while there." "I am happy," Olivia said, feeling the truth of it settle into her chest, solid and unshakable, in a way happiness hadn't felt in longer than a year. "I really am." Word of the engagement moved through the town with the same speed everything else about their relationship had, but this time, Olivia noticed the tenor was almost entirely different. Less speculation, more genuine warmth. The kind of reaction that suggested a full year of quiet judgment had finally gradually given way to something closer to understanding. Diane threw together an impromptu celebration at her house within the week, half the original gala guest list showing up with genuine enthusiasm. This time, no careful distance, no rushed conversations cut short by someone more interesting arriving. Even Marcus Olivia heard secondhand had gone quiet on the subject entirely, apparently having decided after his public humiliation at the fundraiser that further commentary wasn't worth whatever satisfaction it might have once provided him. Captain Reyes sent a card, a formal, slightly stiff congratulations that nonetheless carried real warmth underneath its careful phrasing, closing with a line that made Nathan smile when he read it aloud to Olivia. "Some choices look reckless right up until they don't. Wishing you both a long, happy proof of that." "He came around," Olivia said, reading the card over Nathan's shoulder. "Took him a while," Nathan said, "but I think he came around further than most people manage. That's worth something." The wedding, when it came 6 months later, was small and simple by design. A decision both Nathan and Olivia had made deliberately after everything the past year had taught them about grand public gestures and the machinery that could turn even the most private happiness into a subject for speculation. They held it at the small chapel near the base. Immediate family and close friends. Only Lily, as flower girl, scattering petals with the same total unguarded seriousness she brought to everything Maya. Standing as Olivia's maid of honor, her toast at the reception afterward drawing tears from nearly everyone in the room. "A year and a half ago," Maya said, raising her glass, her voice steady despite the emotion clearly moving underneath it. "My mom stood alone at a party because everyone in this town had decided she didn't deserve their attention anymore. I watched that happen. I hated watching that happen. And then one night, a man walked across a room because he refused to accept that verdict, and everything changed. Not because he rescued her, she'll tell you herself she didn't need rescuing, but because he saw her. Really saw her when everyone else had stopped looking. I think that's the whole lesson here, if there is one. It doesn't take much to change someone's entire life. Sometimes it just takes one person willing to walk across a room." Nathan, sitting beside Olivia at the head table, reached for her hand under the tablecloth, the same gesture that had steadied them both through every difficult month leading up to this one: the photograph, the audit, the fundraiser confrontation, the whispered speculation that had eventually given way to genuine celebration. "She's not wrong," he murmured, leaning close. "No," Olivia agreed, watching her daughter take her seat to warm applause, Lily immediately climbing into the chair beside her to whisper something that made Maya laugh. "She's not." 2 years later, on an evening, not unlike the one where this had all begun, Nathan and Olivia stood together at another charity gala at the same Harbor View Hotel. Different cause, different year, same golden chandeliers throwing light across a room full of people. This time, though, Olivia didn't stand alone by the window. This time she moved easily through the crowd on Nathan's arm, greeting people who had once looked past her without a flicker of guilt, now welcoming her with a warmth that felt, if not entirely earned, at least genuinely offered. Lily, 11 now and taller than either of them fully believed possible, danced with her father in the middle of the floor, the same steady, unhurried steps he'd once used with Olivia, teaching his daughter the same careful respect he brought to everything that mattered to him. Maya, home from her first year of college, stood near the edge of the room with a group of friends occasionally glancing over at her mother with the same quiet pride she'd carried since that first toast at the wedding. At one point during the evening, a young woman Olivia didn't recognize stood alone near the terrace doors, holding an untouched glass, watching the room with the particular careful stillness of someone who had learned recently and painfully what it felt like to be overlooked. Olivia noticed her the way Nathan had once noticed Olivia herself, not because she was the most striking person in the room, but because Olivia recognized immediately and completely the exact shape of that expression. She didn't hesitate. She crossed the room, offered her hand, and asked the same question that had once changed the entire course of her own life. "Would you like to dance?" The young woman looked startled, then grateful, then slowly willing. Across the room, Nathan watched his wife lead a stranger onto the dance floor with the same quiet, deliberate kindness he'd once offered her, and felt something in his chest swell, with a pride that had nothing to do with rank or reputation, and everything to do with the woman he'd married. A woman who had learned through the hardest year of her life that being seen was not a small thing, and had decided ever since to make sure no one standing alone in a crowded room ever had to wonder whether they mattered. Because that in the end was the whole truth of what had happened between them. Not a rescue, not a fairy tale, but two people who had chosen again and again in ballrooms and kitchens and parking lots, and quiet hallway conversations outside a sleeping child's door, to walk toward each other instead of away, to stand in difficulty instead of retreating from it, and to prove one dance at a time that kindness offered without condition has the power to change not just one life, but every life it touches afterward. Nathan Hayes had walked across a crowded room once certain of nothing, except that he couldn't keep pretending not to see her. It turned out to be the bravest, truest, most important decision of his entire life. And it changed everything that came after for both of them forever.